Our first presentation deals with OmniChannel planning for CPGs. Our presenter is Joel Cartwright, Industry Principal for Consumer Products at Vistex. Joel, take it away.
Good morning, John. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to join the conference and present some industry knowledge for the group. As John mentioned, my name is Joel Cartwright. I'm the Industry Principal at Vistex. I've been in consumer packaged goods on the manufacturing side for a little over 20 years, specifically in the trade promotion management optimization space for companies like Sara Lee Foods, Sunny Delight, Kimberly-Clark. For the last several years, I've spent on the software side, retail trade software, optimization software, doing implementation, so forth. So sitting on the manufacturing side and working in software and having to do the type of planning that we're going to walk through today, having both backgrounds, I think it kind of gives me a little bit of unique insight on what we're dealing with these days. So as a consumer packaged goods manufacturer, you're in a pretty tough spot. And I'm speaking specifically to the omni-channel planning, e-portals versus the brick and mortar. You saw the beginning of the slide. The slide title is Bricks and Clicks. I wish I could take credit for that. Unfortunately, I can't. But CPG manufacturers are at a crossroads. They have to make a huge decision right now. And essentially, the decision impacts the second biggest line on their P&L. That's their trade budget. And what they have to understand is, where am I going to invest that? What is the promotional strategy? Is it more focused on the e-commerce, the brick-and-mortar store, or is it both? You ask yourself, well, Joel, aren't they basically kind of the same thing? Well, things can take on a little bit different meaning or approach. So let's kind of define what I'm talking about here. So historically, manufacturers, they took a strategy view of the brick-and-mortar store. It's their traditional in-store merchandising tactics, feature and displays, TPRs, ads, and so forth. And essentially the bread and butter tactics that drove incremental volume for a consumer packaged goods manufacturer. This was clearly defined, the competitors were, and the shelf space by the physical shelf. Historically, the primary trade spend was just the investment strategy into those particular tactics on shelf. Now, the traditional players were able to continue to maintain this. Now we have the introduction several years ago to the e-commerce platform, where Amazon and eBay were kind of the leaders in that space. But as the shoppers technology savvy and the generation kind of moved, that shopper shift was slowly moving to the e-commerce side. So they were seeing that growing shift of consumer shopping, not necessarily away from brick and mortar, but slightly away from brick and mortar to the e-commerce. And this, of course, created the whole e-portals for the individual retailers, and a term we all in manufacturing had to figure out quickly is BOPUS, buy online, pick up in store. So they're starting to see, or we're starting to see the shift in that e-commerce customer going outside of the grocery store. So having said that, specifically as it relates to grocery, the online shopper from 2019 to 2020 has gone up almost 59 cents over the last 12 months. Obviously, we know why. We know the big nut in the room is the whole COVID and the pandemic. But what manufacturers knew that was the shift was coming was slow, and they felt they probably had enough time to make sure they got their arms around the overall strategy. Now, the big question is, on manufacturers' mind, and I know I'm going to have to go through this investment on the e-commerce side and the balance, but what's truly going to be really the move? Is this real? Is that continuation? We know as it's exacerbated, as the slide demonstrates here, of the shift out of the store. But is it real? Am I too late, essentially? Well, here recently, according to a Brick Meets Click study, which is essentially they're a basic advisory firm focusing on digital technology, they found that through a survey, online grocery sales in June of this year totaled about $6.8 billion, which was down 3% from $7 billion in May. So a pretty hefty drop. But the big increase or big surprising note is the drop or the shift or fall off of the e-commerce shopper. They're kind of slowly going back to the store. So what does this say? Is this kind of trend real? We saw it really shooting up. is this trend real? Well, this would indicate maybe not. Maybe it's slowed down just a bit. So maybe you bought yourself a little bit of time in order to do that. So as a manufacturer, are you prepared for this strategy shift? You may have thought about it in the back of your mind. You may have thought about, I'm going to have to do this someday. The last slide had demonstrated that maybe you bought myself a little bit of time. But as an organization, there are really three key areas that you're going to have to review. Three key areas within your organization. Number one, you need to understand how your current organizational structure. You might have historically been paying pretty little attention to the e-commerce teams, even if you had them. More than likely, they were probably understaffed, and they probably included people who had other job responsibilities other than just doing the e-commerce planning. With this accelerated shift or this shift, we know that not having this type of organizational structure is not sustainable. We're seeing it. We know we had a little bit of a slowdown, but it's going to continue to be paced. So as an organization, you're going to have to think, do I need investment? Do I need to be adding dedicated team members with the right skill set to manage this acceleration? So we talk about investment in headcount. It has to be beyond headcount as well. You have to have the right mix of analytical skills, digital skills, and have a complete understanding of the e-commerce shopper behavior. More importantly, you need to understand how your products align to that shopper. So these skills need to be the right mix of people, and these are going to be tough to find because CPG companies right now are scrambling to find these, and they're looking they're looking externally if they're not available internally. So your organizational structure and your people have to be a focus. Do I have the right feet on the ground to understand this problem and to manage it? The second key area is really your current packaging. Now, we talked about the strategy shift from e-commerce to from brick and mortar to e-commerce. I'm talking about, it's TPRs. When I go online, I see products on deal. But now I'm introduced with the now virtual shelf, which in turn makes my category so much bigger. So now what has happened is I have to make sure that my packaging is in line that will sit and be able to pull up in a search engine. It will be appealing to the eye and be able to be definable on a large screen. So in turn, my packaging has to be able to show and be reactive into a search engine. In addition, there's going to have to be investment to come up, frequently searched for. I want to be at the top of a search engine, so that is going to be a trade investment. So this is a different type of strategy away from the in-store. So there's a renewed reality here. There needs to be right decisions to be made to essentially unlock the opportunities that may need to happen with redesigning the packaging. You may have to help increase your brand equity, making sure that it's sustainable, and make sure that you potentially could have the digital appeal to that online shopper. So the packaging, physical versus virtual, now takes on a different meaning. As I mentioned before, the current shelf is no longer metal and with limited space. The biggest planning headache right now is, as I mentioned, the digital shelf. Unlike the physical shelf, it includes a massive now assortment of competitive products. On the physical shelf, CPG manufacturers might be competing with 3 or 4 similar products. But in contrast, the digital shelf can contain a tremendous number of competing products, potentially hundreds. Think of how many canned tomatoes there could potentially be. There's regional providers, national providers, relish and so private label. So when you're buying these types of products, this physical shelf no longer the virtual shelf takes on a whole new meaning. Going back to my prior, that virtual packaging has to be important. The good news is to the smaller brands that they're no longer bound by that shelf placement. So if I'm one of my primary competitors, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, I'm no longer competing for that shelf position, how many facings I get and so forth. So it can be an immense it can be an immense opportunity to smaller brands. That's why I think you're seeing more benefits in wholesale specialty type products that are getting a greater look, because now I've got a searchable global range of brand new types of products. So the traditional brick and mortar category leaders are, they're trying the same thing, but are they digitally savvy as well? More than likely they are. But these startup brands can now be born online, so they can be more nimble to catch up and quicker to the larger brands. So the CPG brands, the primary focus should now be on optimizing these listings on this virtual shelf. When customers are searching for these products, they have to make sure that they're appealing. Now, studies have shown that close to 70%, it blew my mind when I saw this, 70% of virtual shoppers never click past the first page of the search results on e-commerce sites. And often, they really only search the top 3 results, with 64% of those clicks. That means that the product search visibility is extremely important. So if I'm a smaller brand and I'm more tech savvy and I can be more nimble and agile, I can be truly competitive with a larger brand, which makes larger brand companies worried because they do have the money, they have the technology, but can they be agile enough to change that packaging? Are they technically savvy and have to go through an entire group in order to get this new virtual shelf component available? Now, so what I have to do now is, as I mentioned, I have to look at my organization, I have to look at my position, and I have to look at my packaging. But as the beginning of the presentation said, well, where do I need to invest? Where do I need to invest? So the important aspect is that I need to understand first the whole e-commerce component. So let's go there. So as I mentioned, we have to invest in people with that unique mix of analytical skill set. But the second most important thing is data. Right now, there are huge amounts of data out there that manufacturers are needing to tap into. And I think a lot of the presentations you're going to see is that digitalization. How can I organize this data? How do I interpret this data? How do I make sure that the data is actionable? It starts with data harmonization, data cleansing. There's a lot of blocking and tackling that starts. But that data needs to be input and put into a way that I can analytically manage and I can understand the e-commerce buyer. So I need to pull in all this information and make sure that it's actionable. Because what I have to do is I have to change. I have to change and move past that traditional brick and mortar Sally plan. That's that same as last year. I can't do that. My promotional activity has to take up a whole new meaning with temporary price reductions, of course, but where it's positioned on shelf. Is there a banner at the top of the screen? Is there something that I need to understand from an e-commerce portal site? Do I need the promotional activity to be the same in-store as it is online? So it's really important. Going a little bit deeper dive is into the digital versus physical shelf. There's an investment that has to be made here, and I just spoke about it a little bit. The competition in the category is increasing. We've got more and more brands that are coming in or available to the e-commerce shopper. So you now have to begin analyzing at a larger scale the gains and losses to your category share. Who's impacting? What type of positioning? That relationship of merchandising conditions and gain the category share and incremental volume takes on a whole meaning. So can I effectively analyze, because I paid for a certain screen position, did it drive the incremental volume from my online promotional activity? Understanding that search ranking over shelf position. And we talked about it. Traditionally, I would have the 2 or 3 facings, but now it's where does it get ranked? Where do I get pulled up? Where do I get that positioned on shelf? That whole has to take on a new meaning because there's an investment required. Again, it goes back to digital packaging. So I think what you're seeing is hopefully you're seeing is a pattern that's evolving. It's the actual visual aspect of it, the visual package, the visual position are now kind of taking a higher way, a way higher than more than the temporary price reduction. So that's where do I invest? What's more important? Do I have to make sure I understand that my point of sale merchandising is correct and optimized? Are they similar? Do I need to reprioritize certain types of products and so forth? But I need to understand, as I just mentioned, what's the ROI, what's the list? I need to get that retailer data to be able to determine, of course, ultimately, what's my base? The most difficult question to ask a manufacturer is, who's my base customer? Even if from just looking at it from a physical store. Now we've added on the complexity of the e-commerce shopper. What's that base customer? What's that base customer look like? So shelf optimization. This is a term that we all have to kind of get our arms around going forward, in addition to everything else I've spoken about as well. The whole understanding of optimization on the digital shelf. So now I have to understand how I want my optimization to work. First off, I need to look at what's the search visibility. So that first task of that e-commerce team is they need to compile a list of those keywords that are searched by that e-commerce shopper. What are those driving words that can then in turn align to how your product appears on the search engine? We spoke about this as well, the investment into the optimizing my product. Taking those keywords and making sure my product page, my product packaging, contains the key points of those compiled words. Now I can't, if I've compiled 150 words, I of course can't put all those on my package, but I do have to understand my shopper and those keyword search, are they relatable to my products? Obviously, if a keyword comes up gasoline and I'm selling orange juice, that's not going to be impactful. But importantly, I do have to make sure that that relates to my product. I have to work better with my retailer. I have to be much, much more collaborative with my retailer. I have to understand what are my available merchandising options. I have to understand the cost components associated with it. I have to understand it inclusive of photos. What do those photo types look like? How often they need to be refreshed and so forth within the screen. The search prioritization. What's the cost around that? Screen position. Is it driving? So again, analyzing my return on investment. Now, similar to products on the traditional merchandising conditions of feature and display and lift, I have to make sure my recommended products have that enhanced content to make sure it's coming up within the search engine. So in addition to that, does it driving the organic year-over-year growth? Are there enough opportunities to convert shoppers to a purchase? I have to analyze my investment stream. What I mean by that is, am I through the digital portal? Am I pulling in the shopper? Now in the store, I could lure that shopper down the aisle. I could lure that shopper using displays and so forth. I can get them down the aisle. But now the aisle is gone. So that organic growth, the organic shopper. So I have to make sure I get into an additional analysis around what's the strategic value in digital marketing. Do I need to have internal resources around that organic growth and organic marketing focus? Do I need to look at external partners? Again, I talked about you have to work better. We're going to have to work better with our retailers. We need to work with the retailer and evaluate that retailer advertiser platform. What's that consumer platform? How can it be utilized? I talk about the BOPUS. This is where the BOPUS comes in, the buy online, pick up in store. So my retailer portal, what does that look like? Does it fit for me? Do I need to make changes? What's the cost? Because now I need to make sure that it aligns with, and I work with my better retailers who I'm doing this with. And we've probably said this more than once, or you're saying it all the time, but social media marketing is very, very important. Now, we've done the blocking and tackling of understanding our shopper from a category standpoint in store, and I think that translates, I know it translates on the e-commerce. I have to understand my category demographics. I have to understand the cost of the platform. But I want to go back to a little bit on the category demographics. We know from traditional brick and mortar, I can segment certain age categories, gender categories to my product. But now I have that category that may or may not buy online. That shopper who says, I go in and I need a certain type of product and I have brand loyalty, but I don't typically look online, like an older generation and so forth. comparative to the millennials who are all completely online. So when I'm looking at my social media and doing my marketing, I'm marketing my product to someone who may not go online, may not shop online that much, or may not shop online for my product that often. So what's the frequency associated with that? So that's important to understand from an investment standpoint, those key areas. As I mentioned a little bit before regarding where to invest is the understanding the overlaps. When you're developing this kind of mutual or omni-channel strategy, e-commerce and brick and mortar, do those merchandising conditions, do they need to overlap on the retailer portal and in store? Do I need to have a TPR at the same time on the e-portal versus brick and mortar? Again, evaluating if I invest in the e-commerce and I can save some money there, does it drive enough incremental volume where I don't have to run the TPR in store? Now, of course, I think what you're going to find is that probably the investment on the e-commerce side certainly does raise the execution percentage level as compared to brick and mortar, but an evaluation of, does it truly deliver the incremental volume? Is that shopper have the website, have that hand app that they're going in and seeing my tag online as opposed to in store? Same way with ads. I have my digital handheld, my shopper loyalty download from my smartphone. If I invest on just the ad where I can get 50 cents off based upon what I scan on my handheld compared to the tag at shelf in the brick and mortar, do I really want to invest in both? Do I want to keep it consistent? So there's an evaluation. Same goes with a feature. I'm running a feature at the end of the aisle. Do I want to run a shelf positioning on my search engine? Is that constant? How long is the duration for my search engine and my screen positioning compared to in-store? My feature is typically only a couple of weeks. Does the screen position go for a month, and does it drive more traffic? Does it buy more incremental volume? Is it worth the investment? Same for displays and so forth. I have a display ad, positioning it on aisle versus positioning on screen. What's more effective? What's drawing that shopper? Is it better online? So it's an analysis of developing a strategy for both, but there has to be a balance. Again, the entire preface of the presentation is, where do I need to invest? So the key takeaway here is really understanding the digital shelf, the comparatives across brick and mortar stores, where to invest, the different packaging strategies. Is my organization ready for this type of component? Is this type of strategy? As I mentioned, the online shopper will continue to increase. And the big question, of course, manufacturers that I hear all the time is, what is the new normal? I don't think we'll ever get back to a new normal. But I think the new normal is that there has to be decisions that need to be made from an investment strategy. And a lot of companies I'm speaking with all the time is, how do I get my hands around this? Large companies, smaller companies. So we have time, and we have time to kind of work on this. So John, I'll turn it over now for questions. Appreciate the time, everyone. But I'll turn it over now for questions.
Okay, thank you. That was really interesting about a topic that everyone's talking about or should be talking about. Okay, we've had a few questions come in. The first one, are you seeing some manufacturers moving faster than others to adopting an omni-channel strategy?
I am, definitely. Speaking with 2 or 3 customers as recently as yesterday. They're moving faster is because of their category. They quickly understood their shopper is a shopper that's more technically savvy. They understand that their product and the demographic is a shopper that is online more often. So where they understand that they have an e-commerce need, they have an e-commerce shopper, they've rapidly moved to reorganizing or have rapidly moved to reorganizing their staffing around this type of strategy, encompassing the sales folks with the digital media side on the manufacturing. And they're at a point where they've rapidly evolved into, when I do my annual planning process, it contains 2 component breakouts, the in-store coinciding with the online, and how does that eventually roll up? So yes, it's really, really particular product focused. Some are accelerating faster than others. I think the ones that are not accelerating or not moving this are going to soon quickly realize that they need to get there.
Okay, great.
Good question.
Next question. what do manufacturers or retailers in this space see as obstacles inhibiting a true omni-channel planning strategy?
That's a really actually easy question to answer. Where manufacturers, the big obstacles are the siloed groups within their organization, maybe disconnected brands. They're not doing a joint business plan with a particular retail currently, and that's the inhibitor. They're siloed organizationally from that perspective. In addition to that, it's from a technical standpoint. There's a lot of multiple systems that are managed, like the digital marketing component, the TPM component, the optimization. These are different data warehousing, business analysis, business intelligence, and so forth, product specs, and so forth. They're in different solutions. And what needs to happen, this is a topic for another discussion, John, the digitalization component of pulling all that stuff together. And that's a hurdle because some systems are maybe older or antiquated, some may be custom built, different technical platforms, and may have difficulty integrating them together, let alone having a direct API where all this information works in real time.
Okay, great. Next one here. Does organizational structure play a role in supporting an omni-channel planning route to market?
Yeah, we touched on it. That's a good question. It probably plays, if I were to prioritize it, technical versus, it plays the biggest role. It is understanding cross-functionally departments because, as you saw, you've got product specs, product packaging, which getting all these people in the same room with sales, finance, digital media, they've probably never been in the same room together. So organizationally, they play the biggest role because traditionally the salesperson, the finance person, the product master, bill of materials person who's managing all that components may not have the technical background or the savvy that can be shared across all the departments. So organizationally, it's really bringing all these groups together and making sure that they're focused on that. So yes, organizational structure plays a huge role within omni-channel planning.
Okay, we have one more, Joel. Do you see manufacturers encompassing a total cost of doing business plan in an omni-channel strategy?
Oh, that's a good question. I think what omni-channel planning customers have brought to light that whole total cost of ownership or total cost of doing business with a customer. So when they started to bring, as I mentioned, all these compartments together and all these started to try to put all this data together, they're realizing that one of the biggest things when you do change around the organization, start looking at this, wow, this is the total cost that it takes to do business with this customer. So they're not focused on just trade spend. They're not focused on just, logistics or something like that. So now by pulling all this stuff together, not only is it's influencing how you're going to do the omni planning, but it's a big aha moment. So when you start thinking about omni-channel, well, this is the total cost of doing business. And this, of course, morphs into that whole revenue growth management strategy. But when they start bringing all this stuff together and the big aha moment, and I've seen 2 or 3 manufacturers who said that. We started down the omni-channel planning route and we stopped because we started planning. We realized, wow, this is the total cost. Well, we got maybe some other things we got to fix first.
Okay, excellent. That's all the questions we have here. If anybody else has questions, you can contact Joel directly. His email is right on the screen, joel.cartwright@vistex.com. And thanks, Joel, for a great presentation and getting Lead Marketing Conference off to a great start. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Always a pleasure. Look forward to the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Righto.